All right, let's kick off another deep dive. This time, we're going deep into some pretty fascinating ideas from various esoteric teachings. Sensitivity, service, and spiritual evolution, all kind of woven together. I love connecting the dots, so I'm really curious to see where this takes us.
Yeah, it's really interesting how these sources redefine sensitivity. We
Yeah.
usually think of it as like being easily upset,
Yeah.
right? But here, they present it as something, well, much bigger.
Yeah, it's
Hmm.
like not just reacting, but becoming aware of these subtler energies and impressions.
Exactly.
One source even uses this analogy of a baby's eyesight, like the ability's there from birth, but it takes time to actually see consciously.
Right, right. So spiritually, developing sensitivity is like refining our vision.
Okay.
Almost like we start to perceive things we might have missed before, like a deeper connection to our intuition.
Hmm, that makes sense.
And one source even points out that this kind of awareness is, and I quote, the hallmark of the true disciple.
The hallmark of the true disciple. Wow. So if this capacity for inner sensitivity is in all of us, how do we actually develop it? I mean, especially with all the noise and distractions of, well, life. It seems like those subtle impressions could easily get
Well,
lost.
that's where the idea of service comes in. And it's not about, striving for recognition or racking up good deeds like some sources might suggest. Instead, these sources describe it as this natural outflow of love and intelligence that arises from a deep sense of, I guess, alignment within yourself.
That makes me think of Mother Teresa. I was reading about her, and it wasn't about her being on magazine covers or anything like that, but just quietly dedicating herself to those in need without, fanfare. It seems like that's what these sources are getting at.
Yes, precisely. There's a quote from one of the sources that really captures this. A true server gathers around him those whom it is his duty to serve, and not by his claims or loud speaking. It's like that quiet commitment becomes a magnet.
So less about outward actions and more about cultivating that inner state of being. Like the sources mentioned, that divine sons of God quality. Although that phrase makes me wonder, is it referring to all of humanity or a specific group? What does it actually mean to embody that?
That's a great question. In the context of these teachings, divine sons of God points to the inherent potential in each of us. It's like a reminder that our true nature is connected to something, well, much larger, a spark of the divine. And by recognizing this connection, we can tap into this wellspring of love and wisdom to guide our actions.
So less about a literal interpretation, more about recognizing that potential within ourselves and others. I'm starting to see how this ties back to service. If we're coming from that place of interconnection, it's less about doing good deeds and more about expressing that inherent quality through our actions.
Exactly. And the sources are really clear about this. Effective service requires inner work, particularly cultivating intuition and working towards a state of illumination. You can't force it.
Illumination. Sounds pretty profound. What does that actually look like in someone's life?
Imagine someone radiating light just by being who they are, dispelling illusions, negativity. They become a transmitter of light, not through preaching, but through their presence and actions.
That's a powerful image. But the sources also talk about pitfalls on this path, right? Even with good intentions, there are traps we could fall into.
Yeah, they warn against pride or ambition becoming the driving force. You might want to help, but if it comes from ego or a desire for recognition, it can actually hinder true service.
A good reminder to check our motivations. Make sure they're genuine. So how do we know what kind of service is right for us? Do the sources offer any guidance?
They suggest three things. First, trying to understand, in a way, God's plan, like aligning with a sense of purpose bigger than ourselves. Second, recognizing the world's needs, seeing where our skills could be helpful. And finally, being honest about our own capacities, our strengths and limitations, so we can serve sustainably.
Finding that sweet spot where our passions and abilities and the needs of the world intersect.
Exactly. And speaking of divine sources influencing our service, the sources mention Shambhala, this mysterious center often associated with the Himalayas. Have you ever heard of it?
Honestly, it sounds a bit like something out of Indiana Jones. Lost cities, hidden temples, all that. So what exactly is Shambhala and how does it fit into all of this?
Well, the sources describe Shambhala as existing on the etheric plane. Basically, a subtler level of reality beyond our physical senses. It's said to be accessible through etheric vision.
So not somewhere you can just book a flight to, but what's the significance of Shambhala in relation to service?
It's described as this potent source of what they call first ray energy, the will of God. Or, to put it another way, a powerful force for change, positive change. And even though it might seem chaotic, even destructive at times, It ultimately clears away outdated forms, making way for something new.
Like a blacksmith forging a sword. The heat seems destructive, but it tempers the metal, makes it strong.
It's actually similar to an analogy the sources use. They compare the balancing of Shambhala's energy to tempering steel, creating strength and flexibility.
Wow, what a connection. It's about recognizing that change can be uncomfortable, disruptive even, but it's ultimately necessary for growth. So how does Shambhala relate to us as individuals? Can we access this energy somehow, or is it just out there influencing things from afar?
Well, the sources suggest that developing our inner sight, that same faculty we were talking about with sensitivity, is key to connecting with Shambhala. It's like we all have this undeveloped capacity for etheric vision within us. Like an infant's eyes, it needs to be awakened.
So there's a direct link between sensitivity, service, and this higher perception. They're all intertwined.
Exactly. And this true sight, it's not just about seeing etheric energies. It's about developing a deeper perception, one that reveals the interconnectedness of everything. One source puts it this way. Revelation concerns oneness and nothing else.
That's deep. Revelation concerns oneness and nothing else. If we could all see through that lens, wouldn't that completely change how we approach everything? Service, relationships, global challenges.
Absolutely. And that's where the conversation in the source material shifts to the nature of the soul and its role in this whole process of spiritual evolution.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What do they say about the soul? So we've been talking about Shambhala and etheric vision and this idea of oneness. It's a lot. How does the soul fit into all of this? What do the sources say about its role?
Well, they describe it as the formulating aspect, the driving force behind evolution. Think of it like a bridge between spirit and matter, connecting us not only to our bodies, but also to the universal soul, the source of all life.
Okay, so if the soul is the bridge, what exactly is it bridging? What's the difference between the soul and the spirit?
Ah, that's a question that's puzzled philosophers and mystics for centuries. To put it simply, the spirit is pure consciousness, the divine spark. And the soul is the vehicle, you could say, through which that spirit interacts with the material world. It's what gathers experiences, learns, evolves over many lifetimes.
Makes sense. The spirit's the driver, the soul's the car. You need both to get somewhere. But if we're all connected through this universal soul, why do we often feel so separate, so alone?
Ah, that's a great question. It gets to the heart of the illusion of separation. The sources suggest that when we identify only with our physical selves, we lose sight of that deeper connection. But as we start to recognize the soul in ourselves and others, that isolation starts to, well, dissolve.
It's like tuning into a different frequency, recognizing a shared essence beyond our differences. And that kind of circles back to sensitivity, becoming aware of those subtler connections.
Precisely. And the source material takes an interesting turn here, connecting this idea of sensitivity and inner sight with sound and its impact on our world and evolution.
Sound, that's an unexpected connection. Not sure I see the link.
Well, think about it. Our world is filled with sound, from the rustling of leaves to the noise of a busy city. And just like we can develop sensitivity to subtle energies, we can also refine our awareness of sound and its effects.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. We've all experienced how certain sounds can be calming, uplifting, while others can be jarring. But how does this relate to spiritual evolution?
The sources suggest that sound operates on multiple levels. It affects not just our physical bodies, but also our emotions, our thoughts, even our spiritual development. They point out that constant exposure to noise pollution, especially in urban environments, can be really detrimental on a subtle level.
Right, it's like our nervous systems are overloaded, making it harder and harder to tune into those quieter inner frequencies.
Exactly. And they even introduced this intriguing occult principle, sound is color and color is sound, suggesting a hidden dimension to our perception where these two senses are intertwined.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. Like we're only perceiving a tiny fraction of reality. But if sound can have such a profound impact, what about the sounds we create ourselves through speech?
That's where the conversation in the source material shifts to the power of speech. They highlight the importance of right speech. And it's not just about being polite. It's about speaking with awareness, intention, recognizing that our words have power to build or destroy, to uplift or to tear down.
You know, it makes me think of that quote, words are like seeds. They have the power to grow into something beautiful or something destructive. It's a powerful reminder.
Yes, and the sources go even further, saying speech is the most occult manifestation in existence. They also emphasize the importance of silence, not just to conserve energy, but to cultivate inner stillness, receptivity.
So it's not just what we say, but when we choose to speak and when we choose to be silent.
Precisely. They explain that speech has this threefold nature. It can be used to create, to preserve, and to destroy. And it's through conscious choice that we determine which aspects we're expressing.
It's like speech is a tool, and we can use it to build something beautiful or to, well, to tear things down.
Exactly. And all these threads, sensitivity, service, sounds, speech, they all weave together under this umbrella of spiritual evolution.
Like different facets of the same gem reflecting different aspects of this journey of growth and transformation. What does that journey actually look like? What are the stages of spiritual evolution according to these sources?
They describe it as a gradual shift in identification, from seeing ourselves primarily as physical beings to recognizing the soul within, and eventually to identifying with the spirit, that divine spark that transcends limitations.
So it's not about reaching some final destination, but about continuously unfolding, expanding our awareness.
Exactly. It's a process of shedding layers, conditioning, limiting beliefs, revealing the light that's always been there. And this process, the sources point out, is often marked by challenges, tests, opportunities to, I guess, strengthen our spiritual muscles.
Like a spiritual weightlifting routine.
Yeah,
Gotta push yourself to grow, to break through limitations.
that's a great analogy. And just like with physical training, consistency and discipline are key. The sources emphasize daily practices, meditation, self-reflection, right action, to support our evolution.
So it's not enough to just understand these concepts intellectually, but we need to actively integrate them, make them a part of who we are.
Absolutely. Walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And the sources remind us this path isn't a solitary one. We're connected through the soul. We have a responsibility to support each other on the journey.
That's a beautiful reminder. It's not about competition or who's more advanced. It's about recognizing we're all in this together.
Exactly. And as we cultivate our sensitivity, our capacity for selfless service, we become more aligned with this larger plan. Our lives become expressions of love, wisdom, and compassion.
I love how these teachings emphasize practical application. It's not about escaping the world, but about bringing these spiritual principles into our everyday lives, using them to create a better world.
Precisely. The sources challenge us to become conscious creators, using our thoughts, words, actions to build a world that reflects the beauty, the harmony, the interconnectedness of the spiritual realm.
It's inspiring to think about the potential we have as individuals and as a collective to co-create a world aligned with love and peace.
And that brings us back to thought power and thought form building, the idea that our thoughts are incredibly potent, much more than we often realize. The sources emphasize that we're constantly creating these thought forms, whether we're aware of it or not. And these thought forms, they have the power to shape our reality.
That's something I always struggled with. How can something as intangible as a thought create something real?
Imagine your thoughts as energy, vibrating at a certain frequency. Just as sound waves create ripples in water, our thoughts create ripples in, well, in the fabric of reality. They influence not just our own lives, but the collective consciousness. The sources even describe this gigantic thought form hovering over humanity, created by the combined thoughts and emotions of billions of people.
That's a powerful image. Maybe even a little frightening. If our thoughts are that potent, it really makes you realize the responsibility we have to choose them carefully.
Exactly. It's not just about positive thinking, but about recognizing that our thoughts are creative forces.
Mm.
And we have a choice in what we focus on, what we empower. By becoming more aware and by purifying our motives, we can become constructive forces in the world.
So it's about becoming conscious creators, not just letting our thoughts run wild.
Exactly. We're not just passive recipients of reality. We are active participants in its creation. And that brings us to another fascinating concept from the source material. Shambhala is this source of potent first-ray energy, the will of God.
We touched on that briefly before. I'd love to dive a little deeper. What does it mean? How does it connect to everything else we've been discussing?
Well, they describe Shambhala as this mysterious center, existing on the etheric plane, a realm of subtler energies. It's said to be the source of this powerful energy, driving positive change, evolution, even though it might initially seem destructive to outdated forms and structures.
Almost like a cosmic reset button, clearing out what's no longer serving to make way for something new, something better. But how does Shambhala relate to service? How do those two concepts connect?
The sources suggest that as we cultivate our sensitivity and develop our capacity for selfless service, we become more aligned with the energy of Shambhala. Our acts of service create a resonance with this higher energy, allowing it to flow through us more freely, more powerfully.
So it's not just about doing good deeds for the sake of it, but about aligning ourselves with this larger force for positive change.
Exactly. And this influx of energy can then be used to further the divine plan, to contribute to the upliftment of humanity. It's about becoming conscious conduits for this transformative power.
I'm starting to see how it all fits together. Sensitivity, service, sound, the soul, Shambhala, thought form building. They're all interconnected aspects of this journey of spiritual evolution.
That's a great observation. And it's fascinating how the sources emphasize the importance of symbols. In understanding these teachings, they suggest that symbols are like keys, unlocking deeper levels of meaning.
Symbols. I remember them mentioning that, but I didn't quite grasp the connection. How do symbols relate to all of this?
They're like bridges between the physical and the spiritual, allowing us to access truths that might otherwise be hidden. Think of them as a language that speaks directly to our intuition, our imagination.
So it's not just about memorizing what different symbols mean, but about developing the capacity to interpret them intuitively, to extract the wisdom they contain.
Exactly. And they caution against getting too caught up in the literal interpretations. They emphasize that each symbol can hold a unique meaning for each individual, depending on their understanding, their level of spiritual development.
That's fascinating. It's like symbols are alive. They can speak to us on multiple levels, revealing deeper layers of meaning as we evolve. Do the sources give any guidance on how to develop this ability to interpret symbols?
Meditation is key, they say. By cultivating stillness, silence within, we become more receptive to the subtle impressions that symbols convey.
Quieting the mind to hear the whispers of the soul, speaking through symbolic language.
Exactly. And they also encourage us to pay attention to the symbols in our dreams. Those can often hold deep personal significance.
It's a good reminder to be more mindful of the symbols that appear in our lives, waking and sleeping, like they're trying to communicate with us.
Absolutely. And as we become more adept at interpreting symbols, we gain a deeper understanding of ourselves, the world, the mysteries of the spiritual realm.
This is really making me think about symbolism in art, in literature, even in everyday life. Like there's a whole language we can learn to decipher.
It is. It's like the world becomes this living tapestry of symbols, each one pointing us towards a deeper understanding of truth.
This has been incredibly insightful. I feel like I need a moment to process it all. It's a lot to take in.
It's good to pause, to let these insights integrate. We'll be back soon with the final part of our deep dive into sensitivity, service, and spiritual evolution.
In the meantime, I'm going to be looking at everything a little differently, noticing those symbols, those patterns that might have been hidden in plain sight before.
That's a great approach. Remember, the world is a living book of wisdom, and we're all students on this journey of discovery.
Welcome back. It feels like we've uncovered so many layers in this deep dive, exploring sensitivity, service, and spiritual evolution.
And there's always more to discover, isn't there? It's a journey, not a destination. This continuous process of, well, unfolding, expanding our awareness.
That's what I find so inspiring. It's not about achieving some perfect state. It's about growing, evolving. The sources really emphasize this shift, from focusing on the physical self to recognizing the soul and eventually connecting with the spirit.
It is a beautiful progression, shedding layers, limitations to reveal that inner light. But they also acknowledge this shedding process. It's not always easy. Challenges, tests, they're all part of it.
Makes sense. Growth rarely happens in a straight line. We need those bumps, those challenges to build resilience, like a spiritual weightlifting routine. Got to push yourself to grow those spiritual muscles.
A great analogy. And just like with physical training, consistency is key. The sources emphasize the importance of integrating these teachings into our daily lives. Practices like meditation, self-reflection, right action.
So it's about embodying these principles, not just understanding them, living them, not just thinking about them.
Absolutely, walking the walk. And even though this path might seem solitary at times, the sources remind us that, well, we're not alone. We're connected through the soul. We have responsibility to support one another.
That's a beautiful reminder. It's not about competition, about who's more advanced. It's about recognizing we're all in this together.
Exactly. And as we cultivate our sensitivity, that capacity for selfless service, we become more aligned with a greater purpose. Our lives become expressions of love, wisdom, compassion.
I love how these teachings emphasize practical application. It's not about escaping the world, but bringing these spiritual principles into our everyday lives, making a positive difference.
Precisely. The sources challenge us to become conscious creators, using our thoughts, our words, our actions to build a world that reflects that beauty, the interconnectedness of the spiritual realm.
It's pretty inspiring to think about the potential we have, individually and as a collective, to create a more beautiful, more harmonious world. But the sources also talk about some pitfalls, right? Things to be mindful of on this path.
Yes, humility and selflessness are key. True service, it's not about ego or seeking recognition. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness, contributing our unique gifts to the whole.
So letting go of that need to be seen or praised, focusing on the joy of contributing, being a part of something bigger.
Exactly. And they also warn about the dangers of misusing spiritual knowledge or power. True spiritual power is always used for the benefit of all, never for selfish or harmful purposes. It's a reminder that, well, that with great power comes great responsibility.
It is a sobering thought. It highlights the importance of discernment, doesn't it? Both in the information we choose to consume and the way we use our knowledge, our abilities.
A crucial point. The sources encourage us to develop our critical thinking skills, to be discerning. Not all teachings are created equal. It's essential to trust our inner guidance.
Like, we need to develop a spiritual BS detector, filtering out the noise, the distractions, and focusing on what resonates with our truth.
Exactly. And as we evolve, our discernment naturally becomes more refined. We navigate this path with greater wisdom, clarity.
This deep dive has been an incredible journey. I feel like I've gained so much insight into sensitivity, service, spiritual evolution, and how these principles can create a more meaningful life, a more fulfilling life.
It's been a joy sharing these teachings with you. Remember, this is just the beginning. There's a lifetime of exploration ahead for those who are willing to delve deeper.
And I'm definitely excited to continue the journey. I'm feeling inspired to look at the world with fresh eyes, to pay attention to those symbols, those synchronicities that are always guiding us, to find new ways to contribute.
Wonderful. And remember, even the smallest acts of kindness, of compassion, they can have a ripple effect. Keep shining your light.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep evolving, and keep believing in the power we all have to create a more beautiful, a more harmonious world.